Congressman Kucinich, you are head of the Domestic Policy Subcommittee, which has oversight over the FCC. Today in Seattle, there's going to be the last of the FCC hearings, as Kevin Martin, the chair, wants to expedite media consolidation. He says perhaps they'll be taking a vote around December 18th. What control do you have over this?
Well, as the chairman of the Domestic Policy Subcommittee, I can and will hold hearings on the FCC's decision-making process. I think that we are in a time when media consolidation is having a material and adverse impact on our exercise of First Amendment rights in a democratic society. The public may be largely unaware that the electronic media are regulated because the airwaves belong to the people. And the Federal Communications Act of 1934 said that the electronic broadcast media must serve in the public interest, convenience, and necessity. And the more monopolization that happens, the less likely it is that the public interest is going to be protected. So there is a long historic train here of thought that says that media consolidation is a danger to our democracy, and that notwithstanding what the FCC does, Congress should intervene to block any effort that would enable further media consolidation.
And the argument of those who say that the advances, the technological advances in communications, the development of the Internet, basically has made outmoded a lot of the regulations that the FCC operates now to regulate media ownership.
There's a lot of people who think the Constitution's outmoded, too. I think that when we realize the concentration of wealth in our society has accelerated wealth to the top, the concentration of information in our society and control over information accelerates the intellectual wealth of the country and the First Amendment rights of the country into the hands of fewer and fewer. A.J. Lieblein years ago famously said, freedom of the press belongs to the man who owns one. But when you're talking about electronic broadcast media, the people own the airwaves. I mean, that is the fundamental understanding that the American people should have. Those airwaves do not belong to those networks or to those big media companies. The airwaves belong to the public, and they're supposed to serve in the public interest.
We're talking to Congressmember Dennis Kucinich, not only a Congressmember from Ohio, but Democratic presidential candidate. I wanted to ask you about the issue of exclusion of presidential candidates from various debates. Most recently, Mike Gravel, the former Alaska senator. You weren't invited to the Democratic Party's Jefferson-Jackson dinner in Des Moines that the 6 other Democratic contenders are. Your response?
Well, it's pretty interesting when you consider the fact that I've been running consistently fourth in a number of national polls, ahead of 3 of the candidates who have been invited. So what does that say? It says that there's an attempt to rig the presidential election using the Iowa Democratic Party as an accomplice. That's not acceptable. This election doesn't belong to one state or, for that matter, to one party. And so, look at the national polls, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Amy, while we're still on the air, there's something I want to mention that I think is really important. Last night I was reading the Defense Authorization Bill, and there's a section in the bill that I want to read to you. Section 1615 requires the Secretary of Defense to, 1, determine the military unique capabilities needed to be provided by the Department of Defense to support civil authorities in an incident of national significance or a catastrophic incident. And then it goes on to say, provide funds to develop a plan. What's going on in this country? How can we stand by and see our basic liberties undermined?
We're talking to Congressmember Dennis Kucinich in Washington, D.C., running for president. I wanted to ask you about the comment you made during one of the presidential debates, that issue of seeing an unidentified flying object. Can you explain what it is that you saw?
Well, first of all, I was kind of taken aback when I was asked that question. But I understand in Washington the truth is an unidentified flying object, so I guess I could admit that I saw something. Found out later that Ronald Reagan, on 2 occasions, was said to have seen a UFO, that Jimmy Carter was said to have seen a UFO, so I'm assuming that now becomes a prerequisite for becoming President of the United States.
Final comment on media coverage right now of the presidential race that you're a part of.
Well, I mean, the New York Times is yet to discover that I'm a candidate. I could, if I suddenly catch fire in New Hampshire, where we're running 4th and closing in on 3rd place, I would imagine that I could even win the election, and the New York Times would have a big story about 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place, and fail to mention that I won. There's an attempt by the media to manage this election, to try to determine the outcome of the election prior to the people casting votes. It's just another way to try to defeat the public interest and to make of the election a kind of a farce. All I need is an opportunity to debate Senator Clinton on the war. She has voted for the war. She voted to fund the war. She wants to stay in Iraq through 2013. And frankly, her positions aren't much different than Barack Obama's, John Edwards. I mean, when I break into the top 3, the whole election changes. And I'm working on that. I realize I'm a long shot. I don't have any delusions about that. But I also know that right now democracy is a long shot in America. And I realize that our constitutional protections are kind of a long shot. So I'm willing to take that stand, and I think that the people of New Hampshire are going to have an opportunity to upend the political process by voting for my candidacy, which will give them a chance to have a voice and a consistent supporter, not just of peace and workers' rights and health care for all, but of the basic constitutional principles that brought us together to form a nation so many years ago.
Congressmember Kucinich, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Congressmember from Ohio and Democratic presidential candidate. This is Democracy Now! When we come back.